Good evening, everyone. Yeah, winter's here, even though it's warm in Cape Town today. But some of the oxalis have popped up out of the sidewalk. And welcome to tonight's conservation webinar. I'm Rupert Koopman, Conservation Manager at the Botanical Society of South Africa. And we are thankful that you've joined us this evening. We're also thankful to the team behind the event. Basically, Love Green helping us with a lot of the visuals, and also SANBI and crew for supporting us as well. But tonight, we want to zoom in a little bit more on BotSoc itself. And this is a really good preparation for the AGM this weekend. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And realizing that there's a small technical problem. Just give me a second. Okay. Good. So essentially, you all should know the rules by now. Put your name and where you're from in the chat. Questions for the presenters go into the Q&A. We will be having an after party after the formal hour session. If there are any questions that you want to ask the participants or just hang out. And for the rest of it, we just want you to enjoy and see what some of our branches have been up to. I also right up front want to make a disclaimer that not all the branch projects are being featured tonight. We just tried to get a spread of them across the country. So if you want more detail on that, go check out our previous annual reports or Felt and Flora. And yeah, just keep on talking to us. But let's have at it, and let's talk about some of the branches in action. So firstly, how do BotSoc projects get put together? Essentially, what we've done with the conservation unit is we have these 5 key focus areas out of our conservation strategy, and also the 5 focus areas out of the transformation strategy. And you can see there's a fair chunk of overlap between them. I know my head's in the way, but you should be reading these documents by yourself. But essentially, it starts with when someone wants to apply for a branch project or work with national for a branch project. Essentially, we asked them to start thinking about these 5 focus areas as a strategic framework. Then, once the application comes in, we run it through our conservation committee, and then we provide feedback to the branches whether it's been approved or not. And essentially, that was the model for the first 2 years, and we want to keep on doing this. Also, the model was that we would be funding it from national, and due to a lot of branches that have built up reserves because of COVID in terms of not having actions, we're encouraging branches to mobilize their own resources, but still to use this process so that we can make sure that the programs taken forward are linked to priorities. So, and when I talk about priorities, we've worked on these branch prioritization packs, which talk about the most high priority vegetation types and species and so forth in the branch areas. So that we're neatly focused. And when people ask us, what's your contribution towards the National Plant Conservation Strategy, or even the Millennium Development Goals, and we can say, look, we're using this framework. And that's ultimately what it's about. So first round, what I'm going to do is introduce one of our branch committee members from Kabeja. So that's Abdul Latif Ishmael, who's on the line, but we weren't sure if he had power this evening. So we've pre-recorded him. So I'm going to play Abdul's presentation. Please put any questions in the chat, and then we will go on to the next one. So I'm queuing up Abdul's video. And take it away.
Okay, good day all. I am Abdul Latif Ismail, a committee member of the Algoa branch of the Botanical Society of South Africa. And today I'll briefly present on the Adopt a Plot initiative run by the Algoa branch. So in the next slide, just explaining what the Adopt a Plot initiative is. So the initiative is run in conjunction with National Office and sees the Algoa branch members act as custodians for 3 plots of indigenous vegetation located within the city of Kabeja. This project was started in 2012 as a part of BotSoc centenary celebrations, with key focus aspects being conservation and increasing the awareness of the Botanical Society. So activities conducted by the branch on these plots include alien clearing, removing of litter, biodiversity monitoring, and also the erection of informative signposts. So in the next slide. So these plots are located within the Algoa sandstone fynbos, an endangered vegetation type limited to the Nelson Mandela Bay region. Furthermore, these plots are located in 3 separate municipal fynbos types. So I will now briefly look at each of these sites, discussing what makes them important and what threatens them. So the first plot I will speak about is Westring, which is a small a 3.5 hectare plot surrounded by the residential suburb called Westring. And this plot falls in the vulnerable Rowellen Park grassy fynbos municipal vegetation type. So there are a number of threatened taxa in the Rowellen Park grassy fynbos type. So in the next slide, we'll just see some of this taxa. So the Rowellen Park grassy fynbos is characterized by the presence of rocky outcrops, and which is an ideal habitat for succulents escaping fire. The Westring plot possesses 2 of these succulents, the near-threatened Hawatheopsis fasciata on the left there, and a critically endangered Mesem corpuscularia leimanii. The plot also houses a population of a geographically restricted and endangered Gyrolobia. And in the next slides, I'll just go over some of the threats to the Westring plot. So the most prominent invasive species on the plot is Port Jackson wattle, Acacia saligna, which is especially invasive on the rocky outcrops. There are also a number of garden escapes along the fringes of the plot. Recent hacking activities has reduced the Port Jackson presence considerably, but future hacking events with chainsaws are needed to remove the largest individuals. And the BioBlitz for the City Nature Challenge was run on the plot in 2021, and 149 species were recorded, which is quite impressive for such a small area. You might have to deduct about 20 or so species which are aliens or garden escapes. So the next plot I will speak about is Theescombe, which is a 9 hectare plot surrounded by a mix of residential suburbs and small holdings. This plot falls in the vulnerable Colleen Glen grassy fynbos, but it also houses 3 small wetlands which are considered to be critically endangered. As far as the taxa goes, the wetlands contain a critically endangered honeybee species on the left there, and which is Cyclopia pubescens, and also the vulnerable Solago rotundifolia. Okay, next slide. So 2 years ago, the plot was overrun by an assortment of invasive species, most prominently Acacia longifolia, longleaf wattle, and also Brazilian pepper. So there has, however, been a considerable improvement over the last 2 or so years. BotSoc has also seen a great deal of help from both the Dendrological Society, the Atalaya branch in PE, and also the Friends of Van Starens, who have done clearing efforts either along with BotSoc or independently. So, and for the first hack of 2021, first hack I joined in, the honeybush population was entirely obscured by longleaf wattle, so much that we weren't sure if honeybush was still there. But today, the small population, which is about under 30 individuals, are not surrounded by these aliens anymore and are actually visible from the road. Okay, and the third and last plot is Buffelsfontein, which is a representative of the last patch of the critically endangered warmer grassy fynbos. There's a small area is flanked by suburbs to the north and a busy main road to the south. So it's a municipal road, and it's actually Buffelsfontein Road. Okay, in the next slide, there is Erica zaheriana, and which is a vulnerable species. And also there's a large and charismatic population of Erica glandulosa, even though that subspecies is not threatened. And in the next slide, there's a relatively lower presence of aliens in this plot, but small patches of wattle and garden escapes are still there, like that Melaleuca, which is pictured on the right. Okay, and so for the end of this presentation, I will just discuss some future plans regarding the initiative. So the first priority, I think, will be to completely eradicate all invasive species in the plots. So even if a great deal of progress has already been made, there are still some small patches of invasive species present. It will also be beneficial to incorporate the surrounding communities more for BotSoc events that occur on these plots. So some community members in the surrounding areas have joined for hacks, but other activities such as bioblitzes or just general informative events where members of the community are targeted would go a long way in increasing public awareness of their surrounding environment. So there are also plans to extend the Adopt a Plot initiative outside of fynbos, where with areas like Grassridge and Van der Kempskloof, which is currently mapped as thicket, targeted for potential sites. So at the moment, the Adopt a Plot plots are limited to fynbos on the south of the city, but it would be good to extend that to the north as well, to the east. One last thing is for management for the future. So as you know, fynbos will need fire, and all three sites are probably looking a little bit moribund. So some collecting information on how to conduct controlled burns, perhaps in the next 5 years or so, would also be important to guarantee the sustainability of these plots as conservation strongholds. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abdul. So Abdul Latif is online. If you've got questions for him, please stick them in the chat. I see there's a hand up. Krista, we're only going to be dealing with hands up at the end of the presentations. Yeah, what I do from that is just the importance of just looking at these little urban bits as well as the big natural areas that we love so much, because those are where the people are and we need to make them live. So that's important work from the Algoa branch. Okay, so next we're gonna have a mini Q&A. Sandra, thank you for putting up with me, but also putting up your hand. I'm just gonna put up a slide behind us. Oh no, it starts from the beginning again, excuse me. Okay, so Sandra, could you tell us why you would want to engage with a massive document like this, given that what we actually are really interested in as crew members and plant people is this stuff? Yeah, so just quickly, why SDFs? And sorry, SDFs, Spatial Development Frameworks.
Good evening, everybody. I just have to tell you that Rupert chucked me into this morning. Yes, Rupert, I asked myself that question. The spatial development framework for municipalities. They revise it regularly every 5 years, and it forms the planning basis for future looking and the kind of development that will take place and the zoning that they are planning to do. Mossel Bay, the urban area, is like all the coastal areas. It's absolutely swamped by demands, social demands, and people wanting to live here, and the plants are taking its toll. So there are many reasons why I did it. I felt I needed to look at this. I wanted to have a say. I wanted to participate, to show that I care because it matters to me. Should it matter to me? Should I have commented? I don't know. I felt ill-equipped to deal with it. But I do have this whole thing about the moral responsibility. When is something your moral responsibility? And I just absolutely love plants, and who speaks for them? And if those things are gone, they are gone. So I commented. Yeah, I commented. It was like a wish list and areas that I'm concerned about. I didn't quite know what to do because it's a very broad scale document which encompasses the whole district. And to my knowledge, there was no public participation. I couldn't see the maps and the legends on the document in the library because I'm an old tannie with oortjies that struggle. And I eventually had to rig up a big screen next to my laptop at home to be able to read it. So this document was not friendly.
Yeah, and I think in a way, these documents are not designed to be friendly. And we could either wait till that happens or we have to dirty our hands and engage with it. So we're grateful that you did. But I think what was also interesting is that it wasn't that difficult really for you as a resident of Mossel Bay to then get hold of your local councillor and also escalate the points that you have raised so that you could get a response. Could you just like talk a bit about on that?
Yes, I submitted the document. I emailed it to the town planner and he recognized, I asked him, acknowledge receipt, which he did. So did the generic email address of the municipality, the acknowledge receipt, and I sent it along to Cape Nature and they thanked me profusely. And that was that. Meanwhile, during City Nature Challenge, we found this plot of the new population of Diosma aristata. It's the critically endangered buchu that grows only here in Mossel Bay. So there was this beautiful additional population, and it was one of the 12 things more or less in my SDF document. So actually, there's a backstory to the whole getting in touch with a ward councillor about something else, but then I requested a meeting with him. And one of the points was to follow up the SDF. So he actioned it and sent it to the municipal manager, to the planning director, and then back to the town planner, who then commented on each of my little points. And what I just want to say is, it's easy to interact with like-minded people like Cape Nature and you guys, but it's not fun to work with planners and things. They don't know you and they don't know what plant miles and hours you have and what is your credibility. Mm-hmm. And ditto with the councillor. Look, the councillor helped me. I was not very... I did not find that the comments I received back from the town planner was helpful. I could have written those because they were predictable. But at least the councillor and I had a face-to-face meeting. His first sentence when he started talking to me, he put the word in activism. So obviously he thought, I was now going to chop his head off with my green axe.
Yeah.
And then I was actually hypocritically nice.
That's what we're trying to get, because it's very easy to throw the activism word around, but when you come like you did with facts and so forth, then it's a defined kind of issue. This is where we can start getting traction. And for me, what stood out with your engagement, because we've been talking about it offline and via email, is we could try and comment on the entire document, or we could just stick to an area that we know well and where there's a defined issue. Like in this case, we've luckily got this buchu, and we've got the crew people who've been doing work with the buchu, and also subsequently, as you can see in the picture on the right there, making sure that some of the material makes it into ex situ cultivation. So, it's very easy to say, oh, everything's terrible. But as soon as you start breaking it into like small bite-sized chunks, then at least there's something that happens. So you've had an engagement. We've got material of a species that's augmenting that's in the past, and we've probably got a way forward in terms of engaging the municipality. So I just wanted to put this out there to people that, anybody who's got a little bit of like gears, but also Sandra's got 27 years worth of field work and, and so forth behind it too. But like, it's not impossible. And this is almost the kind of thing that, we should almost start like a little work group around, so we can, get people a bit more revved up in their areas. So thanks for that, Sandra. Really appreciate dropping in on the last minute like this. But I thought that with our AGM and us being in the garden route and so forth, it would be important to just get a kind of feel of what's going on the ground there. And really appreciate you joining us.
Yes, thank you, Rupert, and thank you for putting me in touch with Roger, who's there on the picture. Roger Oliver is the buchu man. And this is Kevin Kuhn, one of our crew members in that little meadow. And again, I've said it so many times, it's not just about the Diosma orostata. It is, there's probably 1,000 species in that piece of felt, chochos and goodness knows what. And if that is gone, it's going to be gone. Rupert, even I survived tonight.
Thanks so much. Cool. Okay. Now we're gonna move on to our next speaker. So we've got Dr. Andri van Aert. I apologize for calling a prof on the screen. I mean on the flyer, but these things happen. She's a vegetation ecologist and also paleoecologist based at the Department of Plant Science at the University of Free State. And that's within the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Science. And that combination is also a really cool one. So, Andrew, we're keen to hear what you have to say to us about GH8 and what's been going on that side.
Thanks for the introduction, Rupert. I'm just going to stop my video if it allows me. There we go. So, good evening, everyone. Tonight, I want to tell you about the research that me and my team have been doing in the vulnerable Bloemfontein caroid shrubland, also known as GH8. And then the title of my talk tonight is GH8, the last remnants, with some doikies. So maybe that is something that we can think about. My presentation, there we go, it's not commencing. So you might think, why GH8 and how did BotSoc get involved? So at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, BotSoc contacted me and asked me if I can recommend an environmental specialist that will survey GH8 for them and answer some questions they had. After some discussion and thought between us and amongst us, we embarked on a research journey to gain more knowledge on GH8. Now you might think, what is BotSoc's connection to this vegetation type? Well, the Free State's branch is located in Bloemfontein, mostly make use of the National Botanical Garden and 7 dams where GH8 are located. Furthermore, various threats of selling the land containing GH8 by the Mangaung Metro Municipality and urban developments in the vicinity had to be fended off by the Botanical Society in Bloemfontein. So now you might wonder, why should we worry about GH8? There are various threats to this vegetation type: the urban expansion of the northern suburbs of Bloemfontein, mining of the dolerite for road building material and grazing from domestic stock as well as wildlife on this vegetation type. Furthermore, there are uncertainties about the protection status of this vegetation type. It is listed as both poorly protected and vulnerable, with very limited research and literature available. There are also uncertainty about the biodiversity and functioning of this vegetation unit's ecosystems due to limited research. It is thus important that we understand the ecology of GH8 and maintain the balance between sustainable production and the protection of diversity. So what do we know about GH8? This vegetation type is limited to dolerite sheets, which result in charoid components of vegetation occurring here. These dolerite also result in very shallow soils with a coarse texture, and because of the dolerite, little to no infiltration and high runoff as well as evaporation, which then results in physiological drought for plants in an area that receive high rainfall, seen that the Free State is kind of dry, but relatively high rainfall. This vegetation type is also unique, and according to research by Brown and Dupree in 2014, endemic to the Free State, thus deserving a higher protection status. The current extent of GH8, as mapped by Messina and Rutherford in 2006, is situated as an archipelago of islands from the central to the northeastern parts of the Free State, forming part of the grassland biome of Southern. As part of the National Vegetation Mapping Project in collaboration with SANBI, the late Prof. Johan de Pre mapped the vegetation of the Free State through helicopter flights, Google Earth, and his knowledge of the vegetation in 2016. These newly mapped areas, indicated in green in this slide, is however much more extensive than those previously mapped by Messina and Rutherford, and therefore ground truthing to investigate the vegetation composition of these existing as well as newly mapped areas thus needs to be done. In this slide, we can see a comparison between what Messina and Rutherford mapped in blue and what de Pre mapped in green. So the quest for answers started during April 2022 with field trips to various areas in the vicinity of Brandfort and Verkeerevlei to determine the extent and community composition of this unique vegetation type. This Google Earth image is an indication of one of these areas mapped by de Pre that was visited and surveyed. Although only a few sites were visited, we can already say that new sites identified by de Pre will be included, while in other areas the range of the maps will need to be extended. Thus far, vegetation surveys have been done to determine the community composition of the vegetation in these mapped areas, both of Messina and Rutherford and of de Pre, with a total of 227 plots of 4 square meters that was laid out within these mapped areas of the known and proposed areas. So that data from the plots will also be used to determine diversity among the communities, and an additional 61 transects of 100 meters each were also done to determine the veld condition in the areas that we have surveyed. So what still needs to be done in this vegetation type? So we need to do more surveys towards the northeastern parts of the distribution, determine the community composition in those areas, look at the diversity and the veld condition. The unknown plants that have been collected or photographed needs to be identified. The data that we have gathered needs to be analyzed, and then publications needs to be prepared. We have also collected 227 soil samples during our field surveys. However, the analysis of these soil samples is quite expensive. So we will think of a way in which we can incorporate this soil analysis of these samples, since we feel that it will make a contribution to the research. As a team, we have underestimated the size and the extent of this project, but we'll continue with our ground truthing in the next growing season, starting in November 2022 until April 2023. In this, we will gather more data that will enable us to determine the community composition, diversity, and felt condition of various sections of GH8. As a final word, I just want to thank the Botanical Society of South Africa's Free State branch for financing the fieldwork. And then last but not least, Bloemfontein also had its own BioBlitz. And one of the students, our students, Emma Ferreira, contributed these photos of the BioBlitz that took place in Bloemfontein. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. And that's exciting because Free State branch were a new participant this year in the City Nature Challenge. And we're going to see what they're going to do for the Great Southern BioBlitz. And this kind of primary vegetation work that Andrew was doing, I was just thinking is we tend to think that everywhere is well studied, and you can see even in the Free State, within the town, actually, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And we're going to throw some of our citizen scientists at it too. Thank you for joining us, Andre.
Thank you, Rupert.
Yeah, and if people have questions, just drop it in the chat. Okay, I'm going back to the presentation. And I would like to introduce the chair of our Pretoria branch and an agronomist and plant enthusiast, Richard Hay, to just talk a little bit about what's been going down in Pretoria. Richard, so put your camera on and go for it.
Thanks, Rupert. So as Rupert introduced me, I'm Richard. I'm the chairman of the Pretoria branch. I am an agronomist by training. I just have a huge fascination for plants, which is why I'm part of BotSoc. So I just want to talk about two of our major conservation projects for the next year and going forward. If you can just jump to the next slide. So our first project is a project focusing on Aloe pegrilae. For those of you who don't know, Aloe pegrilae is a critically endangered aloe species here in and around Gauteng. It is incredibly localized and range restricted. And current data suggests within the next 50 odd years, we're going to see an 80% reduction in an already limited population. And so as a Pretoria branch, we are supporting one of our members, Mr. Arnold Frisbee. Arnold is the curator of the University of Pretoria's CICAD collection, but doing his PhD on reintroduction of Aloe pegrilae seedlings back into the environment. And so as a branch, we committing funds to his research and assisting him on that front, but also assisting some manpower later on. And for those of our members who are joining us tonight, you guys will be getting an email shortly. We've literally just confirmed this. But going out into the field and assisting him with the counts of these seedlings. It is also a species of interest for Crew Gauteng. And so towards the end of the month, we're going to be doing a population count of a population that we've just identified thanks to the help of one of our members. And so it is quite exciting for us to get back out into the field. But our major focus as a branch at the moment, we'll go to the next slide, is these confiscated succulents. So they're not in any way, shape or form endemic to Gauteng, but the international market for illegal succulents is obviously massive. And our Western Cape colleagues have a huge problem with succulents being poached from their habitats, particularly out in the succulent Karoo. And obviously those succulents make their way into the international market through OR Tambo. These succulents then get picked up in these boxes, as you see in the picture here, by customs. They then get sent to the Pretoria National Botanical Garden, where we get involved. And so as a branch, we are providing support to the Pretoria Gardens, both in the form of donations of trays and potting mix. This last year, it came from National Office. This year, as a branch, we are donating. But our main focus is providing assistance in the form of identifying these species, sorting them, and then planting them out. They are legal evidence. So last year we had around 300,000 plants. It's a massive operation to try and sort these things, identify, and then keep them alive. It was a bit of a shambles last year, just based on the sheer number of plants, and we were a little bit ill prepared for it. This year we have potting mix and trays well in advance, and obviously now that the Western Cape is getting rain and these succulents are starting to sprout and flower and seed themselves, we anticipate a huge volume coming through Tambo in the next few weeks to months. And this is where we'll step in, bring in the branch and a couple of other volunteers from the university, sort, plant, and keep these plants alive for as long as they remain legal evidence in ongoing trials at a court level. So that's our contribution. Thank you, Rupert.
Thanks, Richard. So that definitely just shows that whole kind of action side of what's going on in the branches, and I'm not seeing any questions from the floor. So that's interesting, because we've got a lot of time this evening. But I also do, if people want to allow me to rabbit on, I can. But right now, let's take a pause. And are there any questions that the panelists would like to ask each other? And if you do, just switch your camera on, and I can pin. Okay. So firstly, I see Sandra's got a question, and I see there's also a question from Graham, which I'll take afterwards. So Sandra, go for it. Just unmute yourself.
Yes, Richard, thank you for that, your presentation as well. I know Adopegleri, and I know where it grows. So start for those little succulents. I think it's a nightmare, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. I wish I could come and help you. I just wanted to know about Adopegleri. You know, so do you collect seed from the wild populations, and then where do you cultivate them, and have they tried tissue culture?
So Arnold's work specifically, there is some work from other organizations just replanting any Aloperidolae. We are admittedly a bit more conservative. Arnold's work is working with two different subpopulations. He collects the seed himself, brings it back to the University of Pretoria nursery. Those seeds are then grown out, separated. His work is looking at different pre-planting treatments to ensure survival rates once the seedlings are planted out back into the veld in their respective subpopulations. So we are quite focused on not mixing the genetics of these populations. As far as I'm aware, no one has done tissue culture on them. They seem to be quite resistant to it, but I don't want to speak out of my area of knowledge. But they are quite difficult to manage. They are also, from what I've seen and from what Arnold has told me, just in personal conversations, the seedlings themselves in a nursery setting are quite susceptible to disease. So he's had to do a lot of work ensuring that the seedlings that he's taking out are not contaminated, and he is very parrot about that, and I applaud him for the amount of work that he's done ensuring that he's not taking anything out into the veld. Because they are such a drought tolerant and resistant species, they do not like attention. So he has had to do a lot of work trying to understand how best to maximize growth without interfering in their biology. So there's a lot of really good science. This is what his PhD is on, basically, is trying to understand how best to grow a species that really does not like being fiddled with before they get taken out into the veld. Yeah, so they don't like attention, but they seem to be responding well to his research. I think he's in the second year of this project already. He would like to wrap up his PhD, but what we see, the potential of his work is now to inform a much longer project. We're in negotiations to reintroduce Allopegrulae into the very extent of the Magaliesberg, along a section within Mamelodi on the ridge there, and we are in discussions with the gardens about expanding their collection. But in terms of the reintroduction itself, a lot of work has gone into ensuring that we don't fiddle too much with the genetics, and unfortunately tissue culture does have the potential to impose mutations onto these populations that we don't necessarily want in a wild thriving population yet.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it's fascinating. They almost like the rhinos because people collect them. They are so exquisite.
Yeah.
And I've also noticed, I don't think they've got much roots. They just easily topple over. And I don't know, maybe with temperatures warming, one hopes that climate change won't affect them then.
I was talking to Rupert before this. There's another project at the University of Pretoria that's now looking at soil profiles related to the range of the species. As someone who does a lot of soil samples, I have no idea how they're even going to take soil samples where Pegrulae grows, because that soil it's so small. It's literally just rock underneath them. These things survive off absolutely nothing. And I see someone in the chat says that they thrive off neglect. They really do. It boggles my mind as someone who works with crops behind me, how these things survive. Yeah, I think they should be fine going forward. It's just their range is so small, and they are being pilfered because they are such a great species in terms of their flowering. I mean, you saw in those pictures is that great red raceme. They're magnificent, but they're just not suitable for a garden setting. So the people who are pilfering them, I can't see, much like the succulents from the Western Cape, I don't see how it adds any value to a collector unless they want to neglect their collection.
Yeah. Well, and remember it's Western and Northern Cape.
And Northern Cape, yeah.
Yeah.
You actually, there's no grass. That's all I know. We have grass, you don't. That's
there is Namaqualand spiny grassland. Anyway, so there's a question from Graham in the chat, and I'll answer it. It's a painful one. What happens to the plants after the court cases are over? So essentially, Graham, these environmental law cases take a really, really long time. And the other challenge is, unless these are single site endemics, it's very hard. And this is tagging on to what Richard was saying about the genetics and not moving them around. It's very hard to ensure that the plants go back to the same place. So that's what there's a whole national strategy for the illegal poaching of succulent plants in South Africa. We're also part of it, the Botanical Society and SANBI and pretty much everyone who works in the arid areas. And these are one of the things that we have to sort out, because ideally that the ones of unknown origin would go and be mother stock in the trade to try and meet the demand legally. But that's just a first step. Andre, I don't know if you saw Anthony Walton put quite an extensive question on the Free State, Eastern Free State sandy grasslands in the chat. Do you want to have a go at that?
Rupert, let me first read the question.
Actually, just read it out so that everyone, or let me read it out. So
okay, I can read it. I've got it.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Go for it.
Excellent presentation, Andre. Thank you. I would just like to ask, are there similar movements and proclamations to protect the vulnerable habitat that is Eastern Free State sandy grassland? I think this type is also endemic to the Free State and can be found in the east around Harry Smith and Golden Gate on certain Inselbergs. From statistical analysis I've done through INAT datasets, there are very little observations made here, and the focus of any one taxa in these plots is minimal at best. As far as I can see, this type shares many of the same geological and hydrological characteristics as GH8. Could you perhaps elaborate what you know about what's being done for this habitat? Anthony, at the current moment, for that specific sandstone grassland area, we have not engaged in working there. So I'm working in close association with the people from VegMap, where they help us identify the vulnerable habitats in the Free State. Sorry, Rupert. Vulnerable habitats in the Free State. So we're currently just working on GH8 and then also GD6, which is the fynbos vegetation type that is also occurring in the eastern parts of the Free State. And we will start off in Golden Gate itself. So one of my master's students is working on that so that we can get a baseline study or baseline data of what it needs to look like before we start looking into the vicinities outside of Golden Gate so that we know what we are looking for. But I'm certain that Anisha and I can speak to each other in terms of VegMap and see what they have in terms of the Eastern Free State sandy grassland. So that is the only way I can answer your question, Anthony.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that side because the one time I've been to Golden Gate, we went for a walk underneath those massive rock faces, and then all of a sudden I start seeing all these fynbos genera, and it wasn't really on the map. And then you get home and on VegMap, it's like, oh, it's what's it? Drakensberg, Altimontaine.
It's the Afromontane something.
Yeah.
Remember GD6. I'll make a note of that and then communicate with Anisha.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Anisha Dairam is a BotSoc member and also the SANBI VegMap person. She's been on some of our webinars before and also written things for the blog. And we also want to be drawing work towards when you guys are in field with iNaturalist, taking pictures for the VegMap project, because that's how we build the online data set of what the various vegetation types look like. So thanks for that question, Anthony. Yeah, he's put it in here, Drakensberg, Amatole, Afromontane, fynbos. That's it, yeah. Okay, cool. Right. I'm gonna go to continue on a couple of announcements from BotSoc side that gives everyone a last chance to think of any questions that they want to ask the presenters. So let me go back to that. Okay, our regular announcement that we're on the organizing committee with crew, and it's very exciting now how we're pushing into Africa with Rwanda, Mozambique, Kenya, etc., getting involved in the GSP, which is coming up to the 28th and to the 31st of October. So look out for the training. If you're interested in starting a project for the GSP in your area, get in touch with us and we can assist. And the international team is putting together all sorts of materials and so forth to help. So it's a really, really cool thing to get involved in. Better time of the year, of course, for us in the south to be out in field and observing. So get your acting gear. Then we also want to make sure that BotSoc INAT users are joining the Botanical Society of South Africa project as well, because this allows us to see how many observations our BotSoc members are doing for the various challenges. I know there are hundreds of BotSoc members active on INAT, but currently there are only 95 members of the project, so please go and join that. And it's another way of us to communicate with you. And then this weekend is the BotSoc AGM. So on Saturday, the 2nd of July, we are having a hybrid AGM. And for those of you who are on Zoom already, you'll be able to Zoom in again on Saturday. So 9:30 to 12 p.m. We'll be coming live from the Garden Route Botanical Garden in George. And that's why it's going to be good to see some of the garden route branch people in 3D when we get out there. And it's just come and see what your society's been up to. It's really important for us to get feedback from members and support, and you know, in spite of it being a really tough couple of years, we've managed to do quite a few things, and we get to celebrate and talk to and hear from the chair Bongani Mnisi and from Tony de Barros, and as well as many other people. Okay, so I see a raised hand over there from Karen Swanepoel. Karen, do you want to type that question into the chat? I'm waiting. Or Karen, do you need me to promote you to speaker? Okay, I'm not seeing any further further questions. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to the final slide here to talk about the next webinar. Then we will stop recording, and then people who want to still hang out here can do so. We'll just take a 5-minute break, and then we can continue. Right, so my final thing is upcoming in a month's time. And as the rains are falling, we are going to be hearing from Odette, Curtis, and the gang at the Overberg Renosterveld Conservation Trust on the fantastic work they've been doing on Renosterveld. And they've just celebrated the 10 years of the project running. So that's sure to be a whole lot of fun and very interesting as well to hear from some of the most critically endangered vegetation in the country, and both the challenges as well as the interesting things like the world's biggest Prince-Vigia Josephini that you can see there in slide. So thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to stop streaming now and then and stop recording, and hope to see you soon. Travel safely. I'll see some of you at the AGM, and take care of yourself. Goodbye.